exactly 12:03 a.m., John Carter's phone rang. On the other end was a voice, one he hadn't heard in 2 years. A voice that belonged to a dead man. In the silence of the night, the whisper crackled through the line, calling him back to a place no one returns from. The graveyard. Phone call. The phone rang at exactly 12:03 a.m. John Carter sat up in bed, his breath catching in his throat. The sharp chime of his phone felt deafening in the silence of his dimly lit apartment. He blinked at the glowing screen. An unknown number. He hesitated. At this hour, it had to be a mistake, a robocall, or maybe a drunk dial from someone who had the wrong number. He should ignore it. But something about this call sent an eerie chill down his spine. Against his better judgment, he reached for the phone and swiped to answer. "Hello?" His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a faint crackling sound, like static, buzzed through the line. "John, it's me." John froze. His fingers tightened around the phone. The voice on the other end was distorted, muffled, but unmistakable. It belonged to someone he knew, someone who shouldn't be calling him. "Who is this?" John demanded, though his voice wavered. A deep, rattling breath came through the receiver. Then, the voice spoke again, this time clearer. "It's me, Mark." John's stomach twisted. His chest tightened as an icy sensation crawled up his spine. "No," he murmured, shaking his head, as if that would make it untrue. "That's not possible. Mark was dead. 2 years ago, Mark had died in a car accident on a deserted highway just outside town. John had been at his funeral. He had seen the coffin being lowered into the ground. He had spent countless nights drowning in guilt, wishing he had convinced Mark to take a different route home that night. Yet here he was, hearing his friend's voice through the phone. "John," the voice rasped, "I need to talk to you." John swallowed hard. Every instinct told him to hang up. This had to be a cruel prank. But the voice, it sounded just like Mark. The same slight drawl, the same familiar tone. It wasn't possible. "This isn't funny," John said, forcing his voice to be firm. "Whoever this is, stop messing with me." Static crackled again. Then, the voice whispered something that sent a shudder through John's entire body. "I'm waiting for you." The line went dead. John sat there, gripping the phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. His heart pounded in his chest, his pulse roaring in his ears. He stared at the screen. The call history showed the number, long and unfamiliar. He tried calling back, but the automated voice responded almost immediately. "The number you have dialed is not in service." John exhaled, sharply, rubbing his face with a trembling hand. Maybe he was dreaming. Maybe his exhaustion was playing tricks on him. He had barely been sleeping these past few weeks, work stress piling up along with his old regrets about Mark. Maybe his mind had conjured the whole thing in some cruel nightmare. But when he checked his phone again, the call log was still there. The timestamp, 12:03 a.m. It had really happened. John didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Instead, he sat in his living room, staring at the phone, waiting for it to ring again, but it never did. By morning, exhaustion weighed on him, but he couldn't shake the unease that clung to him like a second skin. He decided he needed answers. There was only one place to go. The cemetery was quiet when John arrived later that afternoon. The sky was a dull gray, and a cold breeze rustled through the trees. He walked slowly between the rows of tombstones, the damp earth soft beneath his feet. Mark's grave was near the back, beneath an old oak tree. The headstone was simple, just his name and the dates marking his short life. John swallowed the lump in his throat. He hadn't visited in months. The guilt gnawed at him. "I don't know what's happening, man," he muttered, shoving his hands into his jacket pockets. "But if this is some kind of sign, I need to understand." The wind picked up, rustling the leaves above him. The air felt heavier, charged with something unseen. Then, his phone vibrated in his pocket. John's breath caught. Slowly, he pulled it out and stared at the screen. Unknown number. A chill ran through his entire body. His fingers hovered over the screen. Should he answer? His pulse pounded in his ears as he pressed his thumb to accept the call. "Hello?" His voice was barely a whisper. For a moment, nothing. Just static. Then, that voice again. "John, why did you leave me?" John's breath hitched. His throat tightened. His voice cracked. "Mark, this isn't real. It can't be." A faint chuckle drifted through the static, but it wasn't comforting. It was hollow, cold. "I've been waiting," the voice murmured. "And now, you're here." The wind howled around him, and suddenly, the air felt suffocating. John turned, ready to leave, but then he saw it. A figure, standing just beyond the graves, beneath the twisted branches of the oak tree. Tall, motionless, watching. John's breath came in short gasps. He blinked rapidly, but the figure didn't disappear. It just stood there. His phone was still pressed to his ear, but the line was silent now. No static, no voice, just silence. And then, a whisper, so close, it felt like it was right behind him. "I'm waiting for you." John spun around, heart hammering, but there was nothing there. His phone slipped from his fingers, landing in the grass. The screen flickered. The call had ended. John turned back to where the figure had been. Gone, but the feeling remained. A deep, gnawing sensation in his gut. He wasn't alone, and somehow he knew. This was only the beginning. John stumbled backward, his breath ragged, his pulse hammering in his ears. The graveyard was empty. At least, it seemed that way. But the whisper still echoed in his mind. "I'm waiting for you." His phone lay in the grass, the screen dim. He bent down, his hands trembling, and picked it up. The call had ended, but the unease in his chest lingered like a weight he couldn't shake. He forced himself to take slow breaths. Maybe he was imagining things. Maybe exhaustion was making him see and hear what wasn't really there. But deep down, he knew better. Mark's voice had been real. The wind howled through the cemetery, and goosebumps rose on John's arms. He needed to leave. Now, with one last glance at Mark's gravestone, he turned and walked briskly toward his car, his eyes darting around as if expecting to see that shadowy figure again. But nothing moved. Back at his apartment, John locked the door behind him and exhaled. The familiar setting of his home should have been comforting, but it wasn't. His mind raced with questions. Had someone hacked his phone? Was someone playing an elaborate trick on him? He pulled out his laptop and searched the number that had called him. No results, not even a location trace. It was as if the number didn't exist. Frustrated, he dropped his head into his hands. And then, ring. The sound sent a jolt of terror through him. John's phone vibrated on the table. His stomach turned to ice. Unknown number. Again. His hands were slick with sweat as he picked up the phone. He hesitated, then pressed answer, and brought the phone to his ear. Silence. And then, John. The voice was clearer this time. Too clear. You left too soon. John's throat tightened. He gripped the phone so hard his knuckles turned white. Mark. His voice barely came out. What do you want? A deep, crackling breath came through the receiver. Then, you still don't understand, do you? John swallowed hard. Understand what? Static buzzed through the line, and then Mark's voice returned, softer now. There's something I never told you. John felt a chill creep up his spine. What do you mean? A pause. Then, you have to come back. John's skin prickled. He glanced at the clock. 12:15 a.m. This was insanity. He wasn't about to drive back to the cemetery in the middle of the night because of a phone call from what? A ghost, his own guilt manifesting. No, he said firmly. I don't know who's doing this, but I'm done playing along. John, Mark's voice cut through the static. You owe me this. John's breath hitched. Him. Memories surged. Mark's accident, the funeral, the guilt that had never left him. That night, 2 years ago, when Mark had called him, asking for a ride, and John, too tired and too distracted, had ignored the call. And then, hours later, the news. Mark's car had crashed into a tree on the empty road outside town. John clenched his jaw. I couldn't have known, he muttered, more to himself than to the voice. Silence. Then, a whisper. You should have answered. John's chest tightened. The words felt like a punch to the gut. He couldn't speak. The call ended. John didn't sleep. His mind wouldn't let him. By morning, he was exhausted, his thoughts a tangled mess. But one thing was clear. He needed answers. If this really was some kind of prank, he had to figure out who was behind it. And if it wasn't, John shook the thought from his mind. He grabbed his jacket and keys. He was going back to the cemetery. The graveyard was nearly empty when John arrived. A few people wandered among the tombstones, placing flowers, whispering prayers. The air was cool, the sky overcast. John walked to Mark's grave, his heart pounding harder with each step. Nothing seemed different. The same headstone, the same patch of earth. But the air felt heavier, charged with something unseen. He crouched down, staring at the carved letters of Mark's name. What do you want from me? He murmured. Silence. Then, his phone buzzed. His stomach twisted as he pulled it out. Unknown number. His fingers trembled as he pressed answer. John. The voice was different this time. Not static-filled, not distant. It was right behind him. John whipped around, his breath catching in his throat. No one was there. The call was still active. He put the phone to his ear, heart hammering. What do you want? He demanded. The voice whispered, Turn around. John didn't move. Every muscle in his body screamed at him to run. but he forced himself to turn slowly. And there, a handprint, a single dirt-stained handprint on Mark's gravestone. Fresh. John's blood ran cold. His pulse pounded in his ears. Then, something moved at the edge of his vision. A figure, standing at the far end of the cemetery. Tall, still, watching. John's breath hitched. The phone crackled. "Now you see," the voice whispered. The call ended, and the figure took a step closer. John's breath came in short, ragged gasps as he stared at the distant figure. It stood motionless just beyond the mist that clung to the far end of the cemetery. He couldn't make out its face, only the silhouette, eerily still, as if waiting. His phone was still clutched in his hand, the screen dark. The last words of the call echoed in his mind. "Now you see." John's fingers curled into a fist. He needed to be rational. This had to be a prank, someone messing with him. But deep down, a gnawing sense of unease told him it was something more. The cemetery was eerily quiet. No rustling leaves, no distant traffic. Just silence. And then, the figure moved. A single step forward. John's pulse spiked. He took a step back instinctively, his shoes crunching against the gravel path. The air felt heavier, pressing down on him like a weight. Another step, then another. The fog swirled around the figure's legs as it advanced, slow but deliberate. John could make out more details now. The shape of a man, tall and broad-shouldered, but the face, it was still obscured. John's instinct screamed at him to run, but his feet felt glued to the ground. He forced himself to move, his body finally breaking free from the paralysis of fear. He spun on his heel and sprinted toward the cemetery gates, his breath coming in sharp gasps. Behind him, footsteps. Not hurried, not running, just following. John didn't dare look back. He reached his car, yanked the door open, and threw himself inside, locking the doors in one swift motion. His fingers fumbled to start the engine. The car roared to life. He glanced in the rearview mirror. The figure stood just outside the cemetery gates, still watching. John's stomach twisted as he slammed the gas pedal, speeding away from the graveyard, his mind racing with panic and questions. Back at his apartment, John locked every door and window, double-checking each one before sinking onto his couch. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to calm his breathing. He needed answers. He pulled out his phone and checked the call log. The last call, unknown number, no timestamp, no location. He hesitated, then did something he never thought he'd do. He dialed Mark's old number. It rang. John's chest tightened as he counted the beeps, expecting it to go to voicemail. Click. The call connected. John froze. No sound came from the other end. "Mark," he whispered. Silence. Then, a faint breath. A chill crept up John's spine. His grip on the phone tightened. "Who is this?" he demanded. The breathing continued, slow and deliberate. Then, finally, a voice. "You left me, John." John's heart nearly stopped. It was Mark's voice, clear, unmistakable. "No," John said, his throat dry. "Mark, this isn't possible. You never came." The voice continued, softer now. "I needed you, but you never came." John's stomach twisted. The guilt came rushing back, sharp and suffocating. I didn't know," he whispered. Static crackled through the phone, and then Mark's voice returned. "You have to come back." John swallowed hard. "Come back where?" A pause. Then the whisper. "The place where it happened." John's grip tightened. "Mark, The call ended. John stared at the phone, his mind racing. The place where it happened. He knew exactly where Mark meant. 2 years ago, on a lonely stretch of road just outside town, Mark's car had crashed into an old oak tree. That was where he had died. John had avoided that road ever since. But now, he had no choice. Something was calling him there. The drive was tense. The sky was overcast, casting everything in a dull gray light. The further John drove, the more his hands tightened on the wheel. When he finally reached the spot, his stomach churned. The tree still stood, massive and gnarled, its bark scarred from the impact of Mark's car. There were no signs of the accident left. No broken glass, no skid marks, just the tree. John stepped out of his car, the air thick with tension. He walked toward the tree, every step feeling heavier than the last. His breath came shallow as he placed a hand against the rough bark. Then, his phone rang. John nearly dropped it. The screen read, "Unknown number." With a deep breath, he answered. "John," the voice whispered. It was Mark. "I'm here," John said, his voice shaking. "I came back." Silence. Then, "Look down." John's heart pounded as he slowly lowered his gaze. At the base of the tree, half buried in the dirt, was a phone. An old, cracked phone. Mark's phone. John's breath caught. His knees felt weak as he knelt down, brushing dirt away. He hesitated, then picked it up. The screen was shattered, but when he pressed the power button, it turned on. A single message appeared. "You were supposed to answer." John's hands trembled, his vision blurred. Then a shadow fell over him. He looked up and saw him, standing just beyond the tree. Mark, or what was left of him. His figure was distorted, his skin pale and stretched too tightly over his face. His eyes, black, empty voids, bored into John. John's breath hitched. He tried to move, but his body refused. Mark took a step forward, and then everything went dark. John's consciousness drifted in and out like a flickering light. His body felt heavy, as if weighed down by an unseen force. A deep chill had settled in his bones. When his senses finally sharpened, he realized he was no longer by the tree, was sitting in his car. The engine was off and the world outside was eerily still. Fog pressed against the windshield, thick and impenetrable. The dim glow of the dashboard clock told him he had lost at least an hour. His hands trembled as he reached for the door handle, but something in the rearview mirror made his breath catch. Shadow in the back seat. John's entire body locked up. His fingers went numb against the cold leather of the steering wheel. He knew he wasn't alone. The shadow didn't move, but its presence was suffocating. A slow, crawling fear crept up his spine. With a shaking breath, he forced himself to turn his head. The back seat was empty. John's pulse hammered in his ears. His breathing was uneven, shallow. He turned back to the mirror, heart pounding. The shadow was still there, not a trick of the light, not his imagination. Something was sitting behind him, watching. John gripped the wheel. Who are you?" His voice was barely above a whisper. No response. The shadow remained still, its form undefined but unmistakably there. A sudden vibration made John flinch. His phone, the screen lit up displaying unknown number. John's mouth went dry. He hesitated, his thumb hovering over the answer button. Then, gathering every ounce of courage, he pressed it and lifted the phone to his ear. Silence. Then, breathing. John squeezed his eyes shut. "Mark," a distorted voice, barely recognizable, whispered, "You're not alone." John's stomach twisted. He swallowed hard and turned his head. The back seat was still empty, but the feeling hadn't left. If anything, it was stronger. With a trembling hand, he put the phone down. He had to leave. Now. He started the car, the headlights cutting through the fog. He barely glanced in the mirror as he drove away from the tree, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. But as he sped down the empty road, his mind refused to stay quiet. I wasn't alone. The drive back home was long, and the weight of exhaustion pressed on John's shoulders. The eerie silence of the night was occasionally broken by the distant hum of the wind. But then, something changed. The air inside the car grew cold, unnaturally cold. His breath became visible in the dim glow of the dashboard. A sharp, piercing click echoed in the cabin. The rear door lock had just unlocked itself. John's grip on the wheel tightened. He didn't look back. He couldn't. Another click, the other rear door. John's heart slammed against his ribs. He forced his gaze to the road, his breath shaky. Then, a whisper, right behind his ear. "John." He swerved, nearly losing control of the car. His chest heaved as he forced the vehicle to a stop on the side of the road. His hands trembled as he reached for the door handle, ready to throw himself out. But something stopped him. His reflection, the rearview mirror. It didn't show his own face anymore. It showed Mark's, pale, lifeless, his hollow eyes staring right into John's. John's breath hitched, his vision blurred. Then, Mark's lips moved. "You should have answered." John gasped, breaking his stare. He shoved the car door open and stumbled onto the road, sucking in deep, frantic breaths. The night air felt suffocating, thick with something unseen. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Unknown number. John clenched his jaw, refusing to answer. But the ringing didn't stop. It droned on and on, relentless. With a shaking hand, he pulled the phone out and, against all logic, answered. This time, the voice wasn't distorted. It was clear. It was Mark. "Come home, John." John's stomach dropped. Home. He glanced at his car, the headlights still illuminating the foggy road ahead. The presence inside was gone. The mirrors showed only his own reflection now. Something deep inside told him that whatever had happened, it wasn't over. It was leading him somewhere. With a heavy breath, John got back into the car. The air was still cold, but the locks remained shut. The road stretched before him like an endless, dark ribbon. He shifted into drive and headed home. John's apartment was eerily quiet when he arrived. The lights flickered slightly as he stepped inside. He locked the door behind him, taking a moment to catch his breath. Everything seemed normal. His couch was where he left it. His kitchen was undisturbed. But then, a footstep. Not his own. It came from the bedroom. John's blood ran cold. He reached for the nearest object, a lamp. his grip tightening around its base. Slowly, cautiously, he moved toward the bedroom door. He reached out, turned the knob. The door creaked open. Darkness. The room was empty, but something was wrong. The closet door was slightly ajar. John's breath shallowed. He took slow steps forward, his heart hammering against his chest. The air inside the room felt heavier, thicker. He reached the closet. His hand trembled as he grabbed the handle. A deep breath, and then he pulled it open. Nothing, just clothes, shelves, the usual. John exhaled sharply, almost laughing at himself. He was losing it. He turned to leave, and that's when he saw it. His phone. It was sitting on the nightstand, but he was holding his phone. He looked down at his hand, gripping the device tightly, then back at the nightstand. 2 identical phones. His mouth went dry. A vibration. The phone on the nightstand lit up. Unknown number. John felt like the walls were closing in. The phone rang again. The air grew freezing cold. He took a slow step forward, his fingers twitching. With a deep breath, he reached out just as his own phone, the one in his hand, lit up with the same call. 2 ringing phones, 1 caller. The screen on the nightstand flickered. The name changed. It no longer said unknown number. It said, "I'm here." John's breath caught in his throat. The light in the room flickered violently. The air grew thick, suffocating. And then a hand, pale, ice cold, grasped his wrist. John's breath caught in his throat as the ice-cold fingers wrapped around his wrist. His body locked up, a deep, primal terror flooding his veins. The touch was unnatural, neither fully solid nor entirely ethereal, like the grasp of something that didn't belong in this world. He yanked his arm back instinctively, stumbling away from the nightstand. His heart pounded as he stared at the phone still vibrating on the surface. The name on the screen remained. "I'm here." Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the ringing stopped. The room fell into a suffocating silence. The air was thick, heavy with an unspoken presence. John's eyes darted around, expecting something, anything, to happen. But the only movement came from the dim glow of his phone screen. Then, a single text appeared. "Look outside." John hesitated, his breathing uneven. His instincts screamed at him not to obey. But something stronger, an eerie magnetic pull, forced his gaze toward the window. The curtains billowed slightly, though there was no wind. He took slow steps forward, his pulse hammering against his ribs. As he reached the window, his fingers trembled against the fabric before pushing the curtain aside. Outside, under the flickering street light, stood a figure. John's breath hitched. The figure was motionless, standing in the middle of the street, head tilted slightly as if watching him. The light above them flickered erratically, casting the shadowed form into momentary glimpses. There, then gone, then there again. Then, his phone rang. John's fingers twitched. He forced himself to look at the screen. Unknown number. He knew he shouldn't answer. He knew this was a mistake, but he was far past the point of logic. He pressed accept and lifted the phone to his ear. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, "Why did you leave me, John?" John's stomach twisted. "Mark," he whispered. The voice on the other end was low, distant, but undeniably his best friend's. "I waited for you." John's throat was dry. "Mark, I didn't know. I thought," the voice hardened, "you thought you could ignore me." The air in the room dropped to an unbearable chill. John's breath came out in the wisps of white fog. The lights in his apartment flickered. "You shouldn't have left, John. You shouldn't have ignored the call." Deep, suffocating pressure settled over him. His vision blurred at the edges. The voice turned into a whisper, one that slithered into his ears like a breath of ice. "Come outside." John's grip on the phone tightened. "I won't." A click echoed through the room. The lock on his front door had unlatched itself. John spun around, his pulse skyrocketing. Slowly, the door creaked open. The hallway beyond was dark, stretching into an abyss of shadows. Then, footsteps, soft, deliberate, moving toward him. John backed away, his mind racing. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to stop this. His phone buzzed again. Another text. "It's too late to run." John clenched his jaw. No. He refused to let this thing, this presence, control him. He forced himself to move, to run. He sprinted toward the door, grabbing it and slamming it shut with all his strength. The footsteps stopped. Silence. The only sound was his own ragged breathing. Then, from the other side of the door, a whisper, "I'll be waiting." And then, the pressure in the air lifted. The lights returned to normal. The suffocating cold vanished. John stood there, his body shaking, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. He stayed awake the rest of the night, too afraid to close his eyes. The following morning, John did something he should have done from the start. He drove back to the cemetery. The world seemed brighter in the daylight, but it did little to ease the dread in his chest. As he approached Mark's grave, the wind picked up, rustling the nearby trees. He swallowed hard and took a deep breath. "I'm sorry, Mark," he whispered. "I should have been there for you." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, familiar vibration. John's stomach dropped. He pulled out his phone. A final text appeared on the screen. "Goodbye, John." And just like that, the air felt lighter. The weight in his chest loosened. The presence that had haunted him for days was gone. John exhaled, feeling a bittersweet relief wash over him. He didn't know if Mark had finally found peace, but deep down he hoped, he believed that he had. With one last glance at the grave, he turned and walked away. For the first time in days, his phone remained silent.